welcome to hell. Another gloomy press conference in that 2.6 million quid studio that you and I paid for. It was all very familiar. A tired and defeated-looking Prime Minister, back in the pocket of sage scientists and the professors of gloom and doom, witty and valence, the scariest double act since the craze, serving up their usual recipe of apocalyptic predictions and worst-case scenarios.
We will require all contacts of those who test positive with a suspected case of Omicron to self-isolate for 10 days, regardless of your vaccination status. We will also go further in asking all of you to help contain the spread of this variant by tightening up the rules on face coverings in shops and on public transport.
Omicron, more like Omicrap, frankly. Surprise, surprise, in the run-up to Christmas, a new variant of concern has emerged. Christmas wouldn't be Christmas if it wasn't being threatened with being taken away. Well, I'm not concerned about this new variant of concern, because we're done now. With just a few weeks until Christmas, this goose is cooked, and it's time for this turkey to get stuffed. In my view, a failed attempt to control this virus for over a year and a half has done more than enough damage to this country and its people. And yet, with this press conference, we're now back on track for many more months, if not years, of the same. One of the most respected medics in the world, Professor Jay Bhattacharya, head of Stanford Medical School in California in the United States, has described lockdowns as the biggest public health cock-up in history. That's right, the biggest public health cock-up in history. Now, this is a globally respected scientist, not a swivel-eyed nut job tweeting from his mother's bedroom. If we're going to talk about variants of concern, I'm more concerned about cancer. I'm more concerned about heart disease. I'm more concerned about mental health. I'm more concerned about type 2 diabetes. And I'm more concerned about dementia. I'm more concerned about kids and their education and their quality of life. I'm more concerned about the long-term health of the economy, which pays for the NHS, schools, policing, welfare, defence, housing, and more. I'm more concerned about a budget deficit in which more is going out than is coming in. And I'm more concerned about over 2 trillion quid's worth of national debt currently running at 103.6% of gross domestic product, which means the debt is now bigger than the economy itself. Well done, everyone. If we're going to talk about variants of concern, I'm more concerned about the lasting societal damage of COVID passports, which predicates certain rights and access to services based upon your health status. I'm more concerned about the crushing of scientific debate around COVID itself and the vaccine. For example, it's been little reported that the diagnosed cases of the new variant were reportedly among vaccinated patients. How inconvenient for the jab-happy narrative. Fabulous though the vaccines are against severe illness and death, and I'm double jabbed and I will get the booster, they don't stop transmission, and I've got questions about their side effects. Who cares if those side effects are rare? If you're not in a vulnerable group, why pressurise people to have it with the threat of losing your job for non-compliance? And why vaccinate young children? They should not be jabbed, in my view. But don't take my word for it. That was the view of the JCVI, the organisation that advises the government on vaccines. And I stand by their decision. The government didn't. I'm more concerned that we seem to have ignored the principle of natural immunity. Study after study demonstrates that if healthy people get COVID and recover, their protection surpasses that of any vaccine by an order of magnitude. I'm more concerned about almost everything except COVID, because we've had nearly 2 years of this, and it's got to stop. We've sacrificed so much for this nasty virus, and yes, we all hate it and we've lost too many people. But it's a virus non-fatal to almost everyone. And it's a virus which a third of the population have been advised to pretend they've got. Act like you've got it. Remember that? Dance like no one's watching. Sing like no one's listening. And I'm concerned about this press conference today because it takes us back to the cosy COVID consensus, the old narrative. Lockdown, mask up, and screw your freedom. It takes us back to square one. It starts with masks, but social distancing, work from home orders, and lockdowns are lurking around the corner because that is the script they are following. A script religiously followed also by most of the media today. Weren't they absolutely outrageous? All those journalists living probably in comfortable, well-appointed North London homes, pushing for more measures because they can afford it. And let's talk about this mask mandate, in which incredibly the state decrees that we should cover our noses and our mouths without compelling, overwhelming evidence that they have any effect. What about the economic impact of masks? Retailers have told me on this programme that it affects sales. What about the social impact, the impact on small children's view of the world? What about the impact on the visually or audibly impaired? What about the impact on your own health of covering your cake hole and breathing in your own crap all day long? What about the environmental damage? The Keep Britain Tidy campaign told me that we throw away 40 million of these rags daily to go into landfill or worse, the sea, where via fish they will ultimately enter the food chain. Well done, everyone. Now, don't take my word for it. Former Sage advisor Dr. Colin Axon, who's been on this show, told the Telegraph newspaper that masks are nothing more than a security blanket, and he does not recommend them at all. Take a look at this. In the interview, he warned that some cloth masks have gaps which are invisible to the naked eye, but are 5,000 times the size of viral COVID particles. So the holes in the mask are 5,000 times bigger than the virus itself. He says the small sizes are not easily understood, but imagine marbles being fired at builders' scaffolding. Some might hit a pole and rebound, but obviously most will fly straight through. Dr. Axon says that medics were unable to comprehend the minuscule elements at play, adding a COVID viral particle is around 100 nanometers. Material gaps in blue surgical masks are 1,000 times that size, and cloth masks have got a gap 5,000 times as big. He acknowledges, as we all do, that masks will stop saliva flying out of your mouth. We all accept that. But he added, not everyone carrying COVID is coughing, but they're still breathing. Those aerosols escape masks and will render the mask ineffective. The public were demanding something must be done, said Dr. Axon. They got masks. It is just a comfort blanket. But it's now entrenched, he says, and we are entrenching bad behaviour. All around the world, you can look at mask mandates and superimpose on infection rates, and you cannot see that mask mandates made any effect whatsoever. The best thing you can say about any mask, says Dr. Axon, is that any positive effect they do have is too small to be measured. Wow. This is a former advisor to Sage, Dr. Colin Axon. Even though the scientific case for masks is flaky at best, we were told early on by government advisors not to wear one, the damage is beyond doubt. And yet they are making an unwelcome return, like a particularly stubborn case of chlamydia. So why do we see the reintroduction of these measures as announced today at the press conference? Well, in my view, it's politics, not science. With a new variant upon us, the government are indulging in their favourite pastime, being seen to do something, window dressing. We are covering our faces so that they can cover their arses. We've spent almost 2 years on an expensive and damaging roller coaster powered by debatable science. Why does freedom-loving Florida have a lower per capita death rate from COVID than lockdown-loving California? No one will answer that question because there is no answer. Virus gonna virus. Now we're being softened up for more of these questionable measures. This new variant with the fancy name of Omicron has all the makings of an omni-con and an omnishambles. With the vulnerable and anyone else who wants it triple jabbed, it's time to restore personal choice and individual judgment of risk, and we must all learn to live with this virus. Now, of course, we must follow the law at all times, absolutely. But now's the time to make your voices heard, peacefully and democratically, via platforms like this brand new television network, GBNews. Chris Whitty said this week that he feared people will no longer comply with future measures. And who could blame them? The cruel irony is that we comply to make this end, but our compliance means it never will.